Hi guys, Asmo here, and today I have for you the final guide that I'm going to be making for the Grenadier, Mercenary, Witchhunter that I've been playing. This is a build that uses primarily Explosive Grenade and Gas Grenade to deal damage. Overall, I would say this is a good mapper, kind of an all-rounder build, but not a great bosser. Bosses are a little bit challenging and require you to swap few things in your setup, but overall I had fun, especially with mapping. It gets off the ground very early on thanks to the explosions which carry the clear, especially in breaches. So doing breaches was very fun, and I was able to do some high level breaches like T15 breaches very early with this character thanks to those explosions which were carrying it. I was able to afford my headhunter pretty early before it went up to the mirror, and I had a lot of fun with that. However, things became a little bit tougher when it came to doing the bosses, because the character is relatively squishy and relies on, dodging things in order to not get hit if you build it the way I build it, especially with like a lot of movement speed, because in mapping I reach over 60% bonus movement speed, so it's a pretty fast character. It has nice clear, nice AoE if you're like aiming correctly, if you're not staying near the monsters to wait for the grenades to explode, but just like moving on, you're gonna have very nice clear speed. But unfortunately, it tends to get one shot. So I had to swap the setup back and forth. I'm gonna show you different options. I'm gonna show you the more offensive, the quick, and also the more defensive setup. But overall, it's a fun build that I can recommend if you wanna play something that is balanced. But right now we are in the early access. Obviously, everyone is chasing the most broken thing. This is definitely not a broken build. It's nowhere near that. I wouldn't even call it strong. I would just say it's like balanced, kind of like average build. Maybe it's about average. I don't think it's below average because the mapping early on is very nice, but the bossing is not that good. The single target basically hits a cap at some point. I guess with high level of gear and going crit, you could remedy that as well and do even more damage. But overall, it has some difficulty scaling the damage past a certain point. But luckily, just doing like T15, T16 maps is completely fine. The only problem is like it cannot trivialize bosses. You have to actually use skill to do bosses, and it's not a great bossing setup in terms of delivering the damage. So in this video, I'm gonna go over all of the gear that I have. Then I'm gonna go over all of the gems and also the passives. So let's maybe start with the gems actually, because that's gonna be the most interesting. So for the primary gems to deal damage, we have the gas grenade and we have the explosive grenade. There is a few swaps that you can do with the gems here, but for the most time, this is what I was using. So I was using scatter shot, martial tempo, magnified effect, fast forward, and fire infusion with the explosive grenade. And this basically looks like this. You shoot like 5 grenades. It's clearing basically any pack that it hits, and you can basically just throw a couple of them and hit, just kill a rare, do it like that, but you will do more damage if you supplement it with the other grenades. So for the other one, we have gas grenade, which has elemental focus, which has immolate. Both of these make it so that this cannot ignite, but it will hit an ignited target because the explosive grenade will ignite, or it will be also on burning ground from the oil grenades, so it will hit a burning target regardless and benefit from all of these gems. Then we have primal armament, fire penetration, and also inspiration, because this is the most mana hungry gem. If you want to do like the most burst damage possible, you would swap scatter shot for inspiration here, and then you would have more gas grenades. You would do even more damage, but you would quickly find that you're running out of mana and you wouldn't be able to sustain that. Meanwhile, with this setup, you're actually able to sustain that, and it works very nice for clear. So often for clear, I will simply tap the first the explosive grenade and then the gas grenade, and the gas grenade will actually detonate quicker because it has shorter fuse times. As you can see, I threw first the explosive grenade, but the gas grenade detonated first, and then the explosive grenade detonates, and they both explode, doing massive damage. So that's my basic setup. So basically, if there's like a pack, let's say like a magic pack, right, that I know probably will not die in one hit of like any random grenade that I throw, so I will just simply throw 2 of those as a combo, and it will kill anything that's basically in range. The next thing is flash grenade. So this is something that you can also use for clear. It's completely viable to clear with this, and I've been running around just tossing these, especially in like maps that have tight corridors where you have to like quickly pass through, and you want the grenade to detonate as quickly as possible without having to shoot the explosive shot. Then flash grenade is perfect for that, and often it just clears whatever you're hitting anyway. The setup that I have here is Heft, Soul Thief for the mana leech. That's also something that I am using on bosses. If I am running out of mana and I'm running out of flask, let's say it's a very, very long fight because the boss has, let's say, like energy shield, extra life as energy shield, right? Which is like right now completely imbalanced and gives like an insane amount of energy shield, like multiple times the life pool, then that is something that you will be definitely using to recover your mana, right, with this Soul Thief. Then we have Armor, Explosion, and Devastate. This basically makes it so that whenever you stun enemies fully, you break their armor, and whenever you break their armor, you create an explosion, and this explosion actually does fire damage. That's 100% physical converted to fire, so that explosion is also partially what's clearing. And then also Payload, because we're not running with this non-stop, we don't need a great cooldown on this, but it's nice to have, you know, still, you know, relatively decent cooldown. But this will basically give you 50% chance to detonate second time, so that's pretty much a 50% more damage multiplier, right? If you count it like that. So Flash Grenade with this setup, very nice as well. Then we have Oil Grenade, very standard, strip away encumbrance persistence. That's what you always run from the beginning of the game anyway. Nothing new here. Explosive Shot with double barrel, nimble reload, and ammo conservation. Same thing as before, just to, you know, reload faster. This is something that I'm mostly using if I'm, like, for example, running in towers and I want to quickly clear the way for myself. I will just simply toss any grenade and then detonate it immediately and use that. And then we have Stormcaller Arrow. So Stormcaller Arrow is better than the galvanizing trap, or whatever it's called, the lightning trap, for applying shock, because it has a ridiculous multiplier of 800% more chance to shock. So this will consistently apply shock, and there are 4 supports that we can use with this. There is a lightning infusion for more lightning damage. There is conduction for 100% more chance to shock. There is overcharge for increased magnitude of the shock, so that will give you extra percentages, right, making the shock higher. Instead of 20%, it's going to be 35%, so that's basically 35% damage multiplier. And then Stormfire, which makes the shock not expire on bosses that are ignited. And as long as you're dealing damage, the boss is going to be ignited non-stop. It's going to be ignited by your explosive grenade. It's going to be ignited by the oil grenade, covering the mob in oil, or the ground being on fire as well. So you're going to have this up very, very often for a very long time. And maybe once or twice you just shoot this and you are requiring a weapon swap for that. So I'm going to cover that when I get to the gear. But yes, you will need a bow, because this is a bow skill. Bow skills are broken. Crossbow skills are, you know, getting up there, but they're not quite as broken. And then we have Wind Dancer and Attrition. I found that with the Witchhunter explosions from the Zealous Inquisition, Herald of Ash is absolutely unnecessary. So rather than swapping the Attrition in and out and swapping it with the Herald of Ash, I simply just run Attrition at all times, and I have it linked with Cannibalism, Clarity, and Vitality. Clarity and Vitality, just a little bit of regen, but Cannibalism is amazing, gives you huge amount of recovery of life on kill, and that basically keeps you sustained in like crazy environments like breaches and stuff like that. And Wind Dancer, of course, gives us more evasion, just a very, very good buff to run. To sustain all of these things, like to fit all of this in your spirit, you're going to need 135 spirit. So you're simply going to need 35 spirit on one piece of gear. It can be the chest piece, it can be the amulet like I have here, right? So you need 35 spirit in order to run all of those supports. Otherwise, you will have to drop some of these support gems, or you will have to drop one of these, whatever you prefer. So that's basically the gem setup. And here I also have Sorcery Ward, which comes from our Ascendancy. I have elected to recently swap to this because the character was getting one shot, and when you're doing the pinnacle bosses from the citadels, they have certain elemental attacks, and especially like bosses in like T16 corrupted maps with like plus levels, they have certain elemental attacks that will one-shot you, and the Sorcery Ward will definitely help with that, right? So right now I have like about 3,000 ward and 2,500, so that's like what, 5,500 HP, which is pretty decent. And with that, I haven't died recently. The only thing I can die to maybe is like chaos damage if I'm not running my ring with the chaos res, because I'm swapping in the death rush, but I'll talk about it in a moment. But yeah, the character is much tankier that way. Before that, I was running the decimating strike, and for bosses you can run a lot of different setups. The no mercy is actually pretty decent. When I was doing the arbiter cluster of Ash, I was running no mercy and judge, jury, and executioner, and I had a lot of damage. I managed to burst the boss down pretty quickly, but then a very funny thing happened. I actually got a double KO where I killed the boss, but the boss killed me at the same time, right? So without the tankier setup, you are pretty squishy. I think this was the situation where he like spawned the circle where I need to go to, but then he at the same time also shot beam in that, right? So there was like almost nowhere to go. But yeah, so this is the tankier setup with the ward and with a lot of nodes. So I guess maybe I'll talk about the passives now. So we have a lot of armor and evasion nodes that we are taking advantage of, and that is something that is necessary if you want to survive the more difficult maps. You can run with a squishier setup like I had before, and you can be completely fine in maps, just dying every now and then, but as long as you're dodging, you should be fine for most of the time. But if you want to really minimize the amount of deaths, you need to scale a lot of armor and evasion, and you need to take care of your defenses properly. There is another option also for the defenses, which is Cloak of Flame. I've been experimenting with that, especially for bosses. So there are some bosses in maps that do like heavy slams and they do physical damage. So the ward will not really help me against that, and only armor would help me against that. But even with like scaling the armor without the sorcery ward, we would have like max like 4k armor with the level of gear that I have right now. So I would need to get some better gear, and then even then I would get like maybe 6k armor, and I would still probably get one shot by that. So I think a more effective use against more effective defense against physical damage would be Cloak of Flame. With Cloak of Flame, you can also do a lot of different things. You can use also, there is a heat proofing notable that gives your armor also ability to apply to fire damage taken from hits, which kind of double dips. Is much better against physical hits than without that. So heat proofing and stacking armor is something really nice with Cloak of Flame that you can look into defensively as well. So that's just something that I wanted to mention so that you know that that's an option. But otherwise, you're stacking as much armor and evasion and everything. And on gloves, you actually don't want the gloves that I have. You actually want pure armor gloves. You can get like 700 armor gloves with, let's say, some life and resistances, and ideally you'd also have like, rarity or attack speed or flat damage, but like just a huge amount of armor, as much armor as possible. Like you can get up to like 700, and then you can run this node, which is leather-bound gauntlets, which will give you evasion for every armor that you have, right? So the gloves will basically give you 700 armor and 700 evasion, right? And that will scale your ward like crazy, and if you're not using ward, it will give you a huge amount of armor and evasion. So that is something that I would highly recommend in terms of the gear. But more about the passives. So for the Ascendancies, the Calling Strike, the Ward, and the Zealous Inquisition, I would say is like the default mapping setup that you want to run. Because of course, unless you're a god gamer and you want to dodge everything like I was doing in the beginning, then you can just run Judge, Jury, and Executioner and unspec everything and just run increased armor and evasion and cooldown recovery rate, the small nodes. That's literally what I was running, right? Like Judge, Jury, Executioner, Explode, and these small nodes. So that was my like maximum offensive setup because it gives you also CDR, and this also allows you to get some extra evasion and armor, so it's better against physical damage than picking the sorcery ward, right? So if physical damage is the problem, then you can skip that and just run more armor evasion. Here we're pathing through attack speed. I found attack speed to be very useful. It shortens the animation that you have, that your character slows down and allows you to be more mobile, especially like around bosses, which is like the only dangerous time pretty much. So I like the extra attack speed, and for that reason I also have a crossbow with a ton of attack speed. That was like a really expensive crossbow with a huge amount of attack speed. I would highly recommend getting a crossbow with good attack speed. So yeah, we're pathing here through the armor evasion, pathing to the left side. Main reason why we're pathing is the devastation, right, for mapping and the attack speed here, and then also we're picking the armor and evasion. This cluster, I keep wanting to drop it because it has like reduced attack speed. I don't like that it has the reduced attack speed, but it's just so good, it's really hard to drop it. The increased AoE, the accuracy, which also allows me to not have that much dexterity, it's all so good that it's really difficult to drop this cluster. This little cross here is just so powerful. For the weapon swap, I also will cover the passes in a moment, but we will have the weapon swap speed. So I guess if you see, if I use my bow, We have dexterity because I need extra dexterity for the Stormcaller arrow. So we have dexterity on the passive swap skill points. And we also have the quick swap so that when I swap back to my grenades, it's very seamless, right? So if I have the bow here and now I want to shoot a grenade, right? I want to shoot a grenade, it's just pretty much instant, right? So very, very seamless. Definitely nice to get that in your weapon swap. We're grabbing the after image. This is better if you have a lot of evasion, right? If you have like more than, let's say, 50% evasion, this starts becoming really good. Before that, it's not as good, right? Before that, you just, you know, try to get as much evasion as you can, but the more evasion you have, the better this becomes, because it's harder to reach the higher percentage, and the higher you have, the bigger damage reduction this basically becomes. I also picked up the Defiance because I find that, you know, the most important time for you to have more armor and evasion and to not get hit is when you're on low life, which is 35% life or below. So I picked that as well. And then for bosses, especially like for Arbiter of Ash and things like that, you can unspec these nodes. So you can unspec the movement speed on kill, but you can keep all the other movement speed nodes, because especially for Arbiter of Ash, you really want the movement speed. And if you have, like I have right now, like 40 movement speed, 42 movement speed, without you know, without any abilities on, without, you know, death rush or anything on kill, that's gonna make it much more comfortable to dodge stuff. So I would highly recommend keeping the movement speed here for boss fight. It's very, very nice. We have just standard grenade nodes. We have some cooldown reduction, and AoE. Here we have the generous bindings for armor as evasion. We have attack speed, blind, and repeated explosives. So this is all very standard. That's basically every Grenadier character takes that. But where this build differs a little bit is that we're not going to the left side and we're not picking up the smoke inhalation. Although I do that for single target, right? So one of the reasons why I want to reroll from this build is because, you know, I want to do some bosses now, and this is not a good bosser. And to do bossing, I have to like unspec these nodes, right? So I unspec some of these nodes. I unspec these movement speed nodes because I don't need AoE. I don't need the movement speed on kill. And then I go and pick up this pen, right? And that's such an annoying process to have to respec. And then I also respec my explosions and get decimating strike or something, right? That's another annoying thing. You just have to respec anytime you want to do a boss, and that is pretty annoying. So that's why I want to reroll another character for bossing specifically. But as a mapper, this was very, very fun. So the choice that I'm making that is a little bit different than most players is pathing for extra jewel sockets and for a lot of movement speed and also physical mitigation. So this is 3% movement speed, 2% movement speed, 3% movement speed. Then we have jewels with movement speed as well. It's like 2% movement speed per jewel. And then we also have this, which is 5% physical damage from hits taken as damage from random element, which basically means 75% of that 5% is mitigated, right? So what, like 3% or something like that, you're mitigating physical damage, like basically additional physical damage reduction. This also gives you a lot of evasion and also helps you fit with some attribute requirements. I think with this pathing here, I specifically don't need these dexterity nodes for my Stormcaller arrow, but when I'm bossing, I was actually removing these nodes and picking up some damage and even more armor and evasion nodes to not get one shot. I think particularly the Copper Citadel boss has ability where the two beams hover over you and they smash you with like an insane amount of damage, and that was one-shotting me multiple times until I figured out, you know, okay, just dodge that and don't be in the range of it, but it's sometimes covering the entire arena, so it's not a very easy thing to dodge. I think that ability is a little bit out of line compared to other things, because once I didn't get one shot by this one ability, the boss was absolutely piss easy and just did no damage to me, right? So I think that's a little bit out of tune with all the other abilities, right? So either, you know, GG needs to make their mind whether they want to make things difficult or not so difficult, right? So that's basically it when it comes to the passive skill tree. The other options that I would recommend for you would be also pathing here for the armor. So sturdy metal and relentless, especially if you're running armor on your body armor. Of course, don't do this if you're doing, you know, running cloak of flame, because that's going to be useless for you, because this doesn't grant you armor on your body armor. And then a lot of people are pathing here for armor because they're, you know, they're taking a lot of physical damage. They don't know what to do against the physical damage, right? But I think another good option is the cloak of flame. I think the cloak of flame is going to become more expensive, so I sniped this one very early for a very cheap price that had a max roll on the fire resistance and 3 sockets so that I can socket chaos res into it as well. And I would definitely recommend grabbing one before they become too expensive, because that's going to be a very useful item for a lot of builds. And now let's talk about the gear, I guess. So the gear is, some pieces are actually insanely strong that I have, and some pieces are definitely something that needs to be upgraded. So crossbow is one of those insanely strong items that I have. This is an extremely good crossbow. This has 512 physical DPS and almost 700 like physical plus elemental DPS. It also has crit, and it also has mana leech. This is almost as good as you get, right? Crit allows you to, you know, have the option to scale crit if you want, and then the attack speed is absolutely super important for the like fluidity of the playstyle and how the character feels, even though it doesn't on paper improve your DPS because you are capped by your cooldowns, right? If you see, if I spam the cooldowns, you're also capped by your mana, right? So technically you cannot even use fully this attack speed, but you can use it in the sense that you will get your attack off quicker, and then you will be able to run and dodge, which is very important on bosses, right? So for that reason, I highly recommend getting the attack speed, even though technically it's not a, you know, PoB DPS, but in real life it is a DPS increase, right? So definitely get good attack speed on your crossbow, as close as you can to 2 attacks per second, and that's basically it. A crossbow in general, just get as much damage as you can, physical ideally, but it has some, if it has some extra fire damage, or if it has like extra +2 levels, that's going to be also great. +2 levels is amazing. However, be careful of the mana cost, because +2 levels is gonna just tank your mana completely, right? So if you're getting that, you're also gonna need some pieces of gear with mana. So let's talk about that. You can get mana on different pieces of gear. I chose amulet for this. So I have a rarity amulet that has just life, some attributes, spirit. I needed life and spirit and mana. So that's what I got on it, right? I got a good, this is like a T9 mana roll. This one also has mana regeneration, and I catalyzed them all for 20% increased mana and mana regeneration rate. And the anoint that I have, which I think is one of the best anoints that you can get, is the Step Like Mist. So this gives you 4% movement speed. Of course, we love that. Dexterity and intelligence, attributes are always welcome, and 15% mana regeneration rate. And that was kind of enough for me to have, you know, good enough mana. You know, with a little bit of int on the tree, I think I still maybe have some int here. Maybe not actually. Maybe I actually, no, I have a little bit here. With this and with a, you know, 1 or 2 pieces of gear, your mana should be fine. Other than that, you want to make sure that you have a flask with increased amount recovered and charges per second gained, and of course quality it to 20%. And you can also, of course, rely on the leech from your gear. I have leech on the ring, I have leech on the weapon, and I also have leech on the flash grenade, which is actually a huge amount of leech. When you like shoot a flash grenade with all of these things, it's a huge amount of leech. So that's it when it comes to the amulet, anoint, and the mana. Now let's talk about the rings. So for rings, ideally, of course, first order of business is to cap your resistances, right? And if I equip this ring, also, it's a good example of a ring that has all of stuff that you can get. Of course, we cap our resistances. Chaos if you can as well. If you don't have chaos res capped, you ideally want to run the amethyst charm as well for additional chaos resistance. And then the things that you want on the rings other than lives and res is evasion. That's another really good mod. You can get evasion on rings. Flat damage, so you can get like physical, fire, and then also cold and lightning, which are not as good, but physical, fire, lightning, cold, I guess in that order is what you want. You can also get increased fire damage, you can get leech, right? Physical attack damage leached as mana. You are going to also leech a little bit from your explosive grenades because they don't convert 100% of the damage to fire. It's like 80% converted, so the rest is going to actually give you a little bit of leech. And other than that, on the rings, you're also looking for, you know, rarity if you can, right? If you can spare the slots, that's going to be definitely something nice to get. Then for the belt, obviously, you know, Headhunter is right now what I think it is 1 mirror. Okay, I divined mice, so maybe I cannot find rolls with this. Okay, yeah, this is 1 mirror. But good news, if you don't have Headhunter, you're gonna have actually a much easier time gearing, and you're gonna have easier time against bosses than me, because Headhunter doesn't do anything against bosses. This is only good in pretty much like breach, juicing maps with breach and stuff like that. So I might just sell it and have the mirror to invest into the next character. That's probably what I'm gonna do. But it's definitely nice for breaches, and breaches are a very nice way to gain XP and money early on, right? So that's very nice. But for the belt, you're looking for life, resistances, armor. I don't know if you can get evasion, but definitely you can get armor. So like the armor base, you can get extra charm slot, and that's basically it, right? So that's like an extra slot that you can have that I don't have for armor, resistances and life. And also you can get attributes if you're not getting attributes on any other pieces of gear. It helps a little bit with the requirements to get some attributes on some pieces of your gear. Boots, super important to get at least 30% movement speed. They become way more expensive once you get to like 35% movement speed, but yeah, get as much armor or evasion as you can. Just look for the total number because it's gonna contribute to the sorcery ward. So as much armor or evasion or armor and evasion, right? Ideally both, because they both get scaled, but you know, you can choose whichever one you prefer depending also on the rest of your gear. And then life, res, attributes, and that's basically it. For gloves, I already mentioned you want as much armor as possible, and then take advantage of this node that converts the armor to evasion as well, or not converts, it adds the evasion equal to your armor, so you can get like 700 armor gloves and you're gonna be huge. And then for a chest and the helmet, basically life and resistances and armor and evasion. Sockets are a little bit tricky, right? Because it depends on the other pieces of gear as well. So right now I have overcapped resistances. So here, for example, I would like to remove this, or maybe remove this, right? Fire res, because I have overcapped fire res. I have overcapped lightning res actually hugely, but not with this ring. So this is something that I've been using for mapping. Death Rush basically gives you some accuracy, evasion, life leech, and onslaught for 4 seconds on kill. Onslaught gives you 20% action speed, not action speed, sorry, ability speed, right? Or however it's worded. Let's see. Skill speed, okay, that's how it's worded, which is basically attack speed and cast speed. And then it also gives you 10% movement speed. So together with this, I'm getting like 62% movement speed while mapping, I think, which is very, very nice. And now let's talk about the weapon swap bow. So for the weapon swap bow, you're looking for as much physical and lightning damage as you can. And also +2 levels of skills are very useful. And if you can, reduced attribute requirements, because by default this requires like, I think 212 dexterity. So you, depending on like what else you're using, what level of Stormcaller arrow you're using, you might not have that much dexterity. So definitely pay attention to that and be aware that there is a mod for reduced attribute requirements that you can get. And on the quiver, you want, of course, as much phase, lightning, and plus levels as you can get. And that together will make it very, very easy. If you have like anywhere close to my numbers, it's gonna be guaranteed shock on any boss in the game. So the way that this ability works, the Stormcaller arrow, by the way, is that it hits first. If you kind of want to aim and hit the boss, if you don't hit the boss, it's gonna fly until the end of the duration, and then it does a little explosion after a delay, and then it shocks in that area. So that's how it works. And the way I do my rotation for bosses, I guess explain that. I'm throwing my oil grenade first. Then I am stacking the gas grenades. Then as soon as the boss is spawning, I start throwing my explosive grenades, and then I shoot the Stormcaller arrow. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna shoot the Stormcaller arrow. The boss is gonna be covered in oil. It's gonna get shocked roughly during the explosions when they're happening, and the gas grenades are already gonna be popped, and they're gonna explode with the first explosive grenade, right? So it's gonna look something like this. Stack these grenades, stack this, and then do the shock. And then, you know, everything is gonna detonate basically and do massive amounts of damage. Okay, my character just glitched in like a funny way. What is even going on? What? Homie's confused. Like, why is he holding that on his arm like that? Like it's some kind of a gang sign or something. What? Okay. Anyway, so that's basically it for this character. It's definitely fun. It's definitely one of the better takes on the grenade stuff. I find it very versatile, very good at mapping. You know, with this amount of movement speed, mapping is very fun. It looks much better than the other takes I've seen on the build. The other takes I've seen on the build are a little bit tankier, right? I think, and maybe more comfortable, but they're way slower. So if you just care about making currency, I would definitely play it like this. and you have a lot of options for the grenade skills, and you can still do all of the bosses, especially if you're a good player and you can dodge the abilities. All the bosses are going to be relatively easy because you will have enough damage if you aim properly, right? Aiming is a huge part of this though, right? So everything I talked about in this guide is also going to be in the written version of the guide on Mobalytics, which is going to be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.